Time now to take a look through the international newspapers with our press reviewer Elena Casas. Hello, Elena. So we're starting off with coverage of that surprise visit by US President Barack Obama to Afghanistan.
Yes, now the New York Times says he's making the most of a sudden window where relations between the US and Afghanistan are a little bit better than they have been recently. Of course, they've had a number of setbacks in recent months, like that American soldier who was accused of killing Afghan civilians, and of course the Quran burning incident, which sparked massive protests across Afghanistan. Now, he's desperately trying to smooth over relations with, of course, the US election in November clearly in his head. He wants to show that he's managed the situation well. But the New York Times says that while he might have made relations between himself and Hamid Karzai look good in that visit in the last 24 hours, there's a number of huge questions still being asked about what's going to happen in Afghanistan once US troops pull out, which is of course scheduled for the end of 2014. They said there's huge questions still over corruption in the Afghan government, over good governance, and what exactly the US can do to have the country be run a little bit better. What kind of pressure can they put on Hamid Karzai? Of course, there's no secret that a number of people in the US administration have got big questions about how he's chosen to run Afghanistan. So there's all kinds of unclear grey areas, as the New York Times would put it. Nevertheless, though, of course, this visit commemorates the one-year anniversary of the killing of Osama bin Laden, Barack Obama's big foreign policy success. And that, the Washington Post said, is what what Obama is really trying to flag up, and it's what makes it very difficult for Mitt Romney to campaign in any way over foreign policy. He tried to make a speech yesterday, they say, saying that Obama should have taken a stronger line on Afghanistan, saying that he'd made mistakes, saying that the country's not in as good a state as it could be for when US troops pull out. But it's hard for Romney to make this stick with any voters because Obama, of course, has got that big headline, "I killed Osama bin Laden." And that's what foreign policy has chosen to headline a piece today. They're kind of mocking a campaign clip, a TV ad that he's made in the last couple of days, which they reckon could be summed up as, "My name is Barack Obama and I killed Osama bin Laden." He's decided that's a great big important campaign angle to try and win over American voters, something that goes down very well with them. Although foreign policy does point out he's being criticised even among people of his own side for trying to make too much political mileage out of this. After all, it wasn't literally him who killed Osama bin Laden, of course. You know, he may have taken some of the right decisions, but even people within the Democratic Party are saying maybe he's just milked this a little bit too much now.
So a year on from Osama bin Laden's death, some of the papers are asking then just how powerful or how much of a threat Al-Qaeda, the organisation he headed, still is.
Yes, in The Atlantic they say that after all, the last successful deadly attack that Al-Qaeda carried out in the West was in London in 2005. That's how nearly 7 years ago. Has the threat sort of disappeared? Well, they say it's changed and evolved, that something like that happening is unlikely now because the leadership in Pakistan, Afghanistan just doesn't have the strength to organise a big operation happening in Europe or in America like that. But the number of affiliated groups springing up across the Arab world keeps growing and growing in Iraq, in Somalia, in Yemen, in the Islamic Maghreb. They copy the same tactics that Al-Qaeda has and they share the same ideology. So we can't say the threat has disappeared. There's also an interesting piece in The Independent looking at how much influence this ideology is having in Syria. Of course, that's something that Bashar al-Assad's government has tried to make people believe, if you like, that there's an Al-Qaeda-influenced element to the opposition movement. Is it really true? Well, The Independent says that yes, it might well be that because of the chaos really in Syria and the growing sectarian nature of the conflict there, pitting mostly Sunni opposition movement against the Alawite-backed government. And there's more and more risk that an Al-Qaeda-based ideology might indeed seek to make hay from this, seek to make political profit from it, win over adherents. And you can see that in some of the suicide bombings that have been carried out, especially last week in Idlib, they say that at least some of those tactics are being used by the Syrian opposition.
Now, over in the UK, Rupert Murdoch has finally got his comeuppance from the British Parliament.
Yes, Commons Committee said yesterday he is not fit to lead the media empire, which was more surprising, really. He was they were more punishing of him than anyone expected. So, of course, this is on all the British front pages. The Independent goes with the damning verdict. The Times, of course, a paper owned by him, still has to stick it on their front page, but they've got MPs split on whether Murdoch is fit to run the empire. That isn't really true, despite the fact that some Conservative MPs did defend him. Overall, the verdict has been, as The Independent said, damning. The Guardian on their front page have got the beginning of the end. And they explain in their editorial that they reckon with all of this condemnation and public attacks on him, Rupert Murdoch must now be deciding that whatever profit he gets from owning British newspapers just isn't worth all the trouble, and he may start thinking about selling them.
All right, thank you very much, Elena, for running us through the international press.